हुआ नहीं कि नहीं?
हाँ,
मंजीत, तो मंजीत जी यूट्यूब पे इसका चैट कैसे दिखेगा?
सर ये लाइव हो गया, एक बार चेक कर लीजिए।
मैं लाइव तो वही तो मैं देख रहा हूँ, मेरे दूसरे फोन से मैंने लॉग इन किया है इसको लाइव के लिए। ये नहीं हुआ लाइव, स्क्रीन में देख रहे नहीं हुआ है,
एक मिनट,
उसमें दूसरे फोन में देख रहे हैं वो नहीं हुआ
एक मिनट सर, मैं आपको देख।
कोई दूसरा लिंक बनाया क्या? वो ओल्ड लिंक तो नहीं लाइव हो रहा है।
ये दूसरा कोई लिंक नहीं है, सेम लिंक which was shared to you Manjeet of this meeting on which you logged on, you make it live.
एक लिंक तो अभी ऑन है,
हाँ सर,
that I can see, which way
I can't see it. I go to IARF, it shows live but it's not playing anything. Now it is, now it is. Okay,
Yeah.
Commodore Jaising sir, please put on your video. Group captain, mute yourself.
yeah.
Group captain, put off the
I've tried that. Just hold that.
you can always come back and repeat me. Like we had to adjust view. Okay, sir. Group captain and Manjeet, please go off. Only two people should be on when the live is going on. Group captain, sir, the live webcast has stopped.
सर हेलो,
Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this IARF webinar. The topic today is the UK-India Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, and along with that, a Vision 2035. And for this webcast today, we couldn't have a better speaker. We have Commodore Anil Jaising, retired, who has a distinguished service in the submarine arm of the Indian Navy. He has, amongst other posts, been the naval advisor in the Indian High Commission in London, so he's eminently suited to speak on this topic. Currently, he works as a consultant to defense companies and is the vice president of the Indian Maritime Foundation. Sir, welcome to this webcast. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me to this webcast. I'm quite looking forward to discussing the subject, which grabbed headlines in the last few days and is quite a breakthrough move on bilateral sort of building on the bilateral relationship between our two countries.
Sir, now the first thing I'd say is that there is talk of having a number of other agreements in the financial sector. And along with the CETA and the vision, how do these portend for long-term economic relations of the two countries?
You know, I think this CETA, which has happened after 4 years or 3.5 years of very protracted discussions. There have been 14 rounds of negotiations. I think so. They must have, gone through every line, read between the lines, gone through every point threadbare. Both countries have looked out for what their interests are, and finally they've been able to converge on common interests, which benefit both countries. And we've had this CETA. So obviously, it's a very important document. I see this as an important document from another perspective. You know, for the UK, they have entered a free trade agreement with perhaps the largest consumer market in the world and the fastest growing large economy in the world. So obviously it offers a very attractive market for UK products with lower tariffs or duty free, as most of the items will become over a period of time. Similarly for India as well, although we do share a positive trade deficit or a trade surplus with the UK, it gives our industry, our industry is now growing, it's becoming globally competitive, it's being able to deliver world-class products. It needs that breakthrough, that catalyst to project it into the global market. I think this will be the opportunity where they will be able to go into the British market, which is a discerning market. It's not only a market which is restricted to Britain, but British, goods in Britain are seen by many as sort of good quality and of good standing. So I think it will give our industry and our young industrialists, our entrepreneurs, an opportunity to showcase their products in the global market and become part of the larger global ecosystem, which perhaps, the general perception about India being a third world country has prevented them from doing so far in many areas, particularly when it comes to, high-end research, technology, science, etc. So that's one part of it, so that it benefits both countries. The amount of effort that has gone into this, and I think the very fact that this is now even found mentioned in the Strategic Defence Review and the National Security Strategy of the UK, means that this is something they look at very seriously. And I think if both sides follow the CETA in letter and in spirit, and that's the most important part, it's very easy to write down these things, but that momentum has to be maintained. I think this arrangement, this free trade agreement has tremendous potential. A second issue, I think, where this will be of great benefit to both countries is, the multilateral trade system seems to be facing a lot of headwinds. The WTO, President Trump's protectionism, Chinese protectionism. So in this sort of environment where a protectionist regime is coming in and people are more worried about their products, keeping them within, not wanting to sort of compete with the world, this free trade agreement gives us a sort of first mover advantage. We have it now with the UK. Hopefully we should have one with the EU by the end of the year. Now between the UK and the EU, this offers a huge market for India. Yes, if you combine the two economies of the EU and the UK, they are more than the American economy. We are also negotiating a trade agreement with America, with the US. Of course, there are many other factors which are now sort of affecting this. But I don't see a long-term damage to that. This is more, transactional, more sort of immediate. So I think India has gained the first mover advantage in this sort of bilateral trade agreement scenario. India is all for multilateralism, but obviously not when its own interests are going to be adversely affected. So this, I think, for both sides, this CETA is a great breakthrough. And because of that, I think it has the potential to transform the existing Indo-British bilateral relationship across many other sectors, not only trade and the economy. And I hope that this will maintain the momentum and continue to deliver what it promises.
Thank you, sir. Now to come to a more specific, since specific question and since it's your domain, the Vision 2035 has provisions on maritime security. It talks about enhanced cooperation under the IPOI and want to establish a regional maritime security center of excellence. Now, of course, as you know, Vice Admiral Chauhan categorizes India's maritime neighborhood to immediate, proximate, extended, and strategic neighborhood. The UK falls into India's strategic neighborhood. The IPOI essentially is a voluntary, non-treaty-based initiative, and it has 7 so-called pillars. And several countries, both from within the region and further afield, have some role in it. And UK and India both have the maritime security. And of course, as we've all been attending the IPRD held by NMF, each pillar of IPOI is being covered by subsequent successive iterations of the IPRD. Now, one thing is that do you think the IPRD, given that it's more sort of like a voluntary agreement, do these commitments in Vision 2035 really amount to much, or are they just, or is it maybe not of great relevance?
If you look at the larger picture of the Indo-Pacific, I think the shift in the global center of gravity from the Euro-Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific, with 60% of global trade traveling to this part of the world, 2/3 of the global GDP being generated here, 2/3 of the world global population residing here, it is inevitable that European countries will gravitate towards this part of the world and would like to definitely create or ensure that there is a security architecture there which sort of provides the safety and security they need for their trade to travel across. They're probably not interested in the military kinetic aspect of the security dimension, but more the non-traditional threats and ensuring a rules-based order, a free and open Indo-Pacific, etc., etc. So I think all countries, you look at France, you look at Germany, you look at Italy, all of them are slowly increasing their presence in the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific. They may not have the capacity right now to have permanent deployments there, but they do periodically send ships. For example, there's a British carrier task force. IPOI. Now you specifically talked about the IPOI. I think the IPOI was always meant to be the kind of structure it is. It's not a structure that is not shaped into a formal mechanism. It was never meant to be a formal India-led mechanism. India just sort of initiated this at the East Asia Summit and then left it to countries to decide what they wanted to do in the 7 pillars. The important aspect with that is India and UK both are part of maritime security. And I think that is today, in my view, every activity in the maritime domain is underpinned by security, maritime security. So maritime security becomes the key to any activity that's happening in the maritime domain anywhere in the world. Because of the, first we used to only look at the traditional threat. Now we have the traditional, the non-traditional, the transnational, climate change. There's a wide spectrum of threats at sea. And kinetic, non-kinetic, non-contact, contact, all kinds of maritime security has a role to play now in this. So I think from that perspective, the UK has chosen to be part of the maritime security pillar, because notwithstanding whatever sort of, we tend to think that the Royal Navy is no longer the kind of force it was, it's no longer a force to reckon with. But let me tell you, having served there for 3.5 years and having seen the Royal Navy operate closely, it's got tremendous institutional strength because of its long history and long traditions. And as I always said even at that time, do not look at the Royal Navy by the number of ships it has. That is not a decision it took. That's a political decision. What you have to see in the Royal Navy is what does the Royal Navy, what all is it able to do despite having so few ships. That is what you have to see. And you find that in that the Royal Navy comes out very positively. So I think we both stand to benefit from that. There are certain naval technologies that the Royal Navy can offer us. We can learn a lot in interoperability. We can have logistic arrangements with them. When I was there, we used to have exercise Concon has been going on for a long time. Most of the time, the exercise Concon used to happen in Indian waters. While I was there, we sort of took it to the next level. We started having alternate Concons, one in Indian waters, one in European waters, because we said our Navy must also get an exposure to that part of the world. We must show that we have the reach and the legs. So in 2009, when the Western Fleet came over, it was very gratifying to see that all the 4 ships that came, and they were big ships, INS Delhi, INS Brahmaputra, INS Byas, accompanied by INS Aditya, the tanker. All 4 were Indian-made ships, and this was something that I highlighted at every presentation I made. That the complete Western Fleet, which is coming now to Portsmouth, comprises ships which have been built in India. I think that was, and when these arrived, even the Brits, the Royal Navy officers who came, were quite surprised to see, the size of Delhi, the size of Brahmaputra, the size of Aditya, and to know that these ships were built in India. So I think maritime security is an important element for India and UK to cooperate on. UK has a contribution to make. It is still not a small navy, it is still a blue water navy. It has SSNs, it has aircraft carriers, and so it can definitely reinforce the existing maritime security architecture in the Indo-Pacific, even if the carrier battle group comes once in 2 years or once in 3 years. They do always have at least 1 or 2 ships present in the Indian Ocean. It's not that they don't have a presence over here. Coming to the second part, I think you were talking about the Maritime Center of Excellence. When you already have an IOR, IFC, etc., how useful will a regional maritime center, maritime security center of excellence be? I think any such organization which is set up has something positive to offer. It doesn't necessarily have to duplicate the IOR, IFC. It can look at other aspects of maritime security. For example, there's a MARSEC COE in Istanbul. That doesn't do only information sharing like the IOR, IFC does. It does a lot more besides that. They have seminars, they do run courses for other NATO navies. I have lectured over there once, many years ago, so on the Indo-Pacific. So I think any such initiative where you're trying to build this naval capacity or maritime security capacity is a welcome step. So let us see how it shapes up. Let us see what the RMSC actually becomes. But at least it's a thought that has been given. It's something that's been put on paper. So there will be some moves towards that. And perhaps over the years it will evolve into what you would like it to be, maybe a few years from now. So I think it's a good step forward. And I'm sure they must have thought it through to some extent before putting it down on paper.
Yes, sir. You see, the other thing is, scholars often suggest, and everybody suggests UK has closer ties with the Indo-Pacific. This is mentioned.
Sorry, UK has
closer ties with the Indo-Pacific, sir. The recently promulgated National Security Strategy mentions this. Now, in UK, as you know, since we've all been there, the House of Commons select committees have a lot of weightage. They're high influence. It's almost like if a politician or anyone is summoned by select committee, it's treated as they are summoned by House. So the House, in the 2023 report, the Defence Select Committee expressed doubts about the Indo-Pacific tilt. The major concern was the lack of a fighting force. In addition, the Public Accounts Select Committee is concerned about depletion of stockpile due to the Ukraine war. The Defence Select Committee suggested the partnership principle. There have been suggestions for a specific grouping of 7, consisting of the Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere quads plus the UK. There are of course other groupings. So will these groupings amount to much, or they wouldn't really be significant?
Firstly, coming to your first question about the select committee's recommendations or observations, the UK certainly, like I mentioned, does not have the kind of presence it had a few years ago. It has a limited capacity to be present in the Indian Ocean. We are all aware of that. But in 20 looked at India as a potential market. Unfortunately, for various reasons, it has not been able to break into the big league with India. So, though its defense exports to India have languished around the 3%, 4% mark and haven't really crossed that. Metallurgy. Ships or bigger equipment. So India will demand far more technology and far more indigenization than it has ever done before. And now it is no longer just satisfied with what we used to call screwdriver technology. Now it wants deep technology. And I'm sure before putting this whereas they make nuclear powered aircraft carriers of 100,000 tons with EMALs and all the bells and whistles which we can't afford, which I used to find very strange. And I used to bring this up very often. However, notwithstanding that, later on this discussion did start. Of course, we put the aircraft carrier on the back burner now. But electric propulsion is something the Brits have very successfully implemented in their large platforms, their medium platforms, their small platforms across the board. And it's something that India has been looking at very seriously. So I think this is something that is a, a sort of low-hanging fruit, if I may put that, if I may use that term, to kickstart this sort of co-development, co-production, co-design on these kind of elements. The second aspect is, another thing which I think they spoke about is setting up a land-based test facility for the future LPDs, which India will procure. And they want to do this by 2030 is what I read somewhere. Now the LBTS, UK, the Royal Navy has been using a land-based test facility for their ships for a long time. They had one for the Daring class, they had one for the Type 23s, which I visited just off Portsmouth. And this I was very keen at that time that India should look at something like this. And so whenever, a senior flag officer used to visit from India, I used to try and arrange a visit for them. Admiral Kannan, I took Admiral Kannan there, I took a couple of other admirals there as well. And India was very keen at that time, and these admirals were very keen that, yes, this is a very good facility. But somehow it didn't gain the traction it should have gained at that time. And if it is doing so now, I'm glad it's happening, because this is something that saves a lot of training time on a platform. And because it saves training time on a platform, it reduces the wear and tear on the platform. And so it is a useful facility to have. And I'm glad they're talking about these two elements in the immediate future. But there are many other areas, particularly if we start working together in areas like quantum, unmanned technologies. UK is very good at autonomous and unmanned technologies on the surface and underwater. We should be talking to them a lot more about that. So these are the areas, I think, as we move ahead with the TSI and this industrial partnership, we'll be able to talk design and development, we'll be able to talk co-production and co-development. And that is something that is very positive. But like I said, the momentum has been set. This momentum, now it has to be maintained and it has to be followed in letter and spirit. That's the bottom line actually for this entire TSI.
Right, sir. Sir, another thing is, one is that you yourself have written a chapter in our IARF strategic yearbook last year on underwater domain awareness. Now, do you think India and UK, there's much effort about cooperation in UDA, and that there are already existing groupings doing that? So how important is UDA? Because it's been specifically mentioned.
UDA is something that we should be paying a lot more attention to than we are. We seem to use this. We use a term called maritime domain awareness, MDA, which is becoming very popular. And often it is said that UDA is a subset of MDA. Actually, in my view, UDA is MDA, because maritime domain awareness does not mean on what is on the surface of the sea. It means what does the sea have? What do the oceans have? We have given a military connotation to MDA and said, okay, if you're able to track a ship on the oceans, or if you're able to track a fishing fleet, or if you're able to catch some non-traditional activity happening, security challenge, that's MDA. That is not MDA. Surveilling the surface of the sea is not MDA. That is situational awareness. If you want MDA, UDA are one and the same thing. You've got to understand what is below the surface of the water, what is below the surface of the sea. And this is absolutely critical, particularly when you're going to be operating submarines. And that is why you see a preponderance of Chinese research vessels hanging around the Indian Ocean, because they're trying to understand the hydrology of the Indian Ocean. And therefore, if tomorrow we need to have, and I'm talking only from a military perspective, I'm not talking from a scientific perspective or a research perspective. If tomorrow we want to have an ability to be able to monitor submarines coming across from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean, or submarines operating in the Indian Ocean of other countries, we have to understand and know the hydrology very well. We need to have the means to be able to detect them. We need to be able to have the means to track them, which means unmanned autonomous vessels, seabed-based sensors, something like what the Brits used to have, or what NATO used to have, called the SOSUS in the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, where they used to monitor Russian submarines, Soviet submarines coming into the Atlantic during the Cold War. So if we have to reach that level of capability, we need to cooperate with each other in understanding the intricacies of the underwater domain. And that requires a lot of scientific research and scientific activity. The UK has done a lot of work in unmanned underwater technologies. That means they have an understanding of that. Perhaps they're not familiar with the hydrology of this part of the world. But that is certainly something that, both countries should work towards, in seeing how can we improve our awareness of the underwater domain. From both a military perspective, as I mentioned, and also from a research and security perspective. Underwater cables, underwater infrastructure, offshore drilling, seabed mapping, resource extraction. There's no end to the potential that the underwater domain offers. And it's time we started looking at deep research in these areas. And if we can find a partner who can do it with us, who can provide us the means, who can provide us the technology, so much the better.
Well, what about an existing part? Because, India has already existing partnership with, one can say, Russia, France, Israel, and the US. are today India's major defense suppliers. Now, does the UK really have anything that none of them would have?
Yeah, see, defense. So with UK, Israel, Russia, and France, we have what we call a very deep strategic relationship, which translates into a transfer of military hardware. We bought 20 billion of military hardware from the US. 36% of our military hardware comes from Russia. France is a major supplier of a lot of very important equipment. So is Israel. So why not UK? If UK can offer the kind of support, strategic support that these countries offer, and offer technologies that we can't get from other places, and they are willing to share those with us in this present scenario, where we want to not just get the technology, we want to understand the technology, we should be able to become Atmanirbhar or self-reliant, then it's definitely something the UK should be looking at. And if the UK is willing to share that kind of thing, I'm sure there's enough room for UK also to be a major player. You must understand one more thing that has changed. So in the last 3 years after the Russia-Ukraine conflict, what has changed is this shift in Europe, brought on by pressure from everybody about increasing the defense budgets. Now, if they're going to increase their defense budgets, they're going to place a lot more orders for military hardware on their own industry, whether it's their shipyards, whether it's their defense industrial complex. More pressure than on their large defense industrial complex is going to come on the ecosystem around it, the tier 1 vendors, the tier 2 vendors, the sub-suppliers, because these small companies may not have the capacity now to be able to meet the complete European requirement and still have extra capacity to offer to countries where European countries export equipment to. For example, India, or for example, Turkey, or for example, Greece, or wherever else. Now, countries like India, which are fairly technologically sophisticated, vis-a-vis many others, South Korea is another one, have the wherewithal and the technical expertise and the brains of amongst its people to become an alternate supply chain, to become an alternate supplier to the supply chain of these companies. And more companies are now looking at India for this purpose. So now when you find a foreign company coming to India to collaborate, he's not only looking to offer technology for that particular order which he has to execute, but he's also scouting around to seeing how these companies are delivering equipment, also scouting around to see if they can find good suppliers to plug into their global supply chain. So this is a win-win for both. It provides European companies the capacity, and it gives us, our young entrepreneurs, our industry, a window into the global market, a foothold into the global market, where they can showcase their skills and the quality of work they do. And believe you me, I have gone around many companies in India, because I work for a defense company, and we are doing exactly the same thing, looking for Indian partners. And there is amazing work happening in industrial pockets in various parts of the country. When we see these factories, they meet every possible international standard that you can think of, whether it's in terms of hygiene, whether it's in terms of the quality of their work, whether it's in terms of their quality processes, the refined workmanship, the skill set of their engineers, their R&D base. It's amazing to see what all is happening in the Indian defense industrial complex. We just have to give them the opportunity to be able to break into the larger global market. And that is what this Russia-Ukraine war has provided, that opportunity. Now we have to make the most of it.
So the one more thing is, they talk about upgrading the existing 2+2 dialogue to the next, which is at a senior official level, to the next higher level. India already has this dialogue with Australia at a ministerial level. Is upgrading this dialogue really going to change anything on the ground, or it will just be more optics, upgrading it to ministerial level?
No, I think any dialogue, depending on the level at which it is held, carries weight, because depending on at what level it's being discussed, when the output or the outcomes of the dialogue are passed down the line, it depends on where it's come from. Has it come from a minister? Has it come from a joint secretary? Obviously. So, unfortunately, the Indo-UK 2+2 is still at joint secretary level, not even at the defense secretary level. Whereas over the years, we've established 2+2s with the US, with Japan, with Australia, at the ministerial level, at the foreign minister and defense minister level. So I think it's time for this relationship to also look up. And I think perhaps part of this, this Vision 2035, perhaps this upgradation will happen in the next few years. Personally, if you really want to take this relationship forward, the way we are sort of talking about it now, certainly we need to upgrade the level of interaction at the governmental level. And ideally, I think if the UK indeed is going to be a major partner of ours, whether it's a free trade agreement or it's a technology security initiative or it is the Defense Vision 2035, then I think a ministerial level 2+2 would be appropriate.
Right, so the last question I'd say before is, you see, whether we like it or not, anyone UK or anyone likes it or not, there is a bear in the room. India has very close ties with Russia. Now, there's no way India, for anyone's sake, is going to drop Russia. I mean, so how do you, I mean, this has been a constant concern of even of the select committees in their several outlooks and several reports that they've given. So how are both India and the UK going to navigate the Russia factor in this?
You're right. Russia has really become the bear in the room. There's no doubt about it. But I think, the Western countries have to be sensitive to the fact that India has been doing business with Russia for a long time. It's been a reliable and a trusted partner of India for a very long time, from the Soviet days. Of course, it's not the same relationship as it was with the Soviet Union. A little transactional element is there. So we're not going to drop them. That's one part of it. Secondly, 60% of our legacy equipment is Russian. We have to keep it going till the end of its life. So there is no choice for us but to go to Russia and retain that military relationship with them. Plus, we have also bought things like the S-400 from them now, which is a long-term thing. We're talking about the S-500. So I think there has to be a certain amount of sensitivity in the European capitals that this relationship will continue, but it does not impinge on India's strategic relationship with the West. In the sense that if you look at the US, now when Turkey, which is a NATO partner, bought the S-400, they imposed CATSA sanctions on Turkey. But when it came to India, there was bipartisan support for giving us the waiver. So obviously, they understand that we have this thing with Russia. Of course, it's a geopolitical thing. It works in America's interest to have us on their side in this part of the world. And really, if you look at the Indo-Pacific right now, or rather the Indian Ocean, the Indo of the Indo-Pacific, who other than India can these countries really count on as a reliable partner for security, for the safety of their trade, for their future markets, for their defense industrial complex, alternate sources of supply? It's India. So I think they all have to learn that, they have to understand they have to engage with India. India has its own compulsions. It is doing business with Russia. It is not letting that business interfere with what it's doing with the European countries. And look, till the Ukraine war happened, Europe was very happy doing business with Russia. In fact, they were very convinced that, this was the way ahead for Russia to bring them into the sort of mainstream. And perhaps, I don't know, perhaps when President Putin goes, things might change again. So I really don't know whether we should, European countries must understand that we have to do business. And I think France has come to terms with it. Israel has come to terms with it. The US has come to terms with it. So why not the UK? You mustn't forget, imagine at a time when the Cold War was at its peak in the early 80s, the Brezhnev-Reagan kind of environment where they were so touchy about small things. We bought the Kilo class submarine and the 209 submarines at the same time. And we built the 209 submarine in India. So Germany allowed India that much technology to build its latest submarines of that time, despite the fact that we were really close to the Soviet Union at that time. And we were getting submarines at the same time from the Soviet Union. So why not now? That's one part of it. Secondly, if you look at the Indo-Soviet relationship or the Indo-Russian relationship, they have given us technology and equipment which nobody in the world has given to anybody else. There is not a single other instance of a lease of a nuclear submarine from one country to another. Even today, the Americans are hesitating whether they want to lease a Virginia class to Australia or not. and they keep rocking the boat as far as AUKUS is concerned. So when you look at the depth of that relationship, it's something you can't just discard. And you have to sort of understand that this is something we have to live with, and both sides can live with it. Yes, we should also not sort of shove it in their face all the time. We should also be subtle about it. And I'm sure, if the other countries in Europe can come to terms with it, I'm sure so can the UK.
Okay, thank you, sir. I mean, it's been a very enlightening discussion, and I'd now throw the floor open, whoever our online viewers are, because whoever is watching us on the YouTube channel, please put your questions in the chat box, and these shall be taken up. So they don't seem. If any viewer wants to ask any question, please ask it. Or any comments, reactions? I think there don't seem to be any questions, and most of the issues have been addressed. But well, if there aren't any questions, I mean, I don't know how much longer we can wait for audience or viewers to view and to ask any questions. Then all it remains for me, sir, is to thank you very much for this discussion, for all the insights you've given. And I'm sure all our viewers will be highly enlightened by this. And also this talk is being recorded, and it'll be going on our IRF YouTube channel. And of course, the live webcast should also be visible for a few days. So once again, sir, thank you very much. And with your permission, I'll stop recording the meeting now. And thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, Rishi. Thank you, and thank IRF for this opportunity. And I hope it has been informative for your viewers. And I look forward to more such opportunities. Thank you very much.
And thank you, and also God save the king. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Group Captain Mehta. Now we've stopped recording. Do you want to come in, sir?
He's muted, I think.
Mehta. Pardon?
I think he's muted.
Group Captain, unmute yourself if you want to come in and put on your video. Sir, do you want to come in and say anything? Okay, fine. I think he's not there. And Manjeet, do you want to come in? Great, sir. So now I think it's still live on the YouTube channel. I think there's a slight time gap. But Manjeet, please put off the live webcast.